Now with our lead story and analysis of the president's speech to the Muslim world. Joining us from Philadelphia, Fox News analyst Dr. Marc Hill. Now, what grade would you give the speech?
I didn't divide it up the way Carl did. I would give him a solid B minus.
B minus, B-boy minus.
Okay. B minus.
I'm surprised.
Absolutely.
I thought you would grade him higher. What was the deficit in the speech? Why the minus?
Well, there are a few. I think on the one hand, he held back far too much with his critique. I mean, I think he overstated his allegiance to Israel at the expense of, Palestinian justice. He talked a lot about being an ally, an unwavering ally to Israel, which is fine. He talked about Jewish persecution, which I agree with. But then he sort of very quickly, talked about Palestinian oppression. I think he had to talk about that with greater nuance and depth. I think another thing here is that he didn't really talk very much about solutions. There weren't very many policy implications. It's one thing to just talk about making everybody feel better and everybody coming together. In some ways, it felt like he was playing Mad Libs with the race speech he gave a year ago. That same type of rhetoric is important, but it needs to be backed by policy. Without that, it's just empty.
Okay, but I think what he was doing was what I said to Mr. Rove. He's setting the table. He's setting the table for the policy stuff later on. He wants people, and he's got a great opportunity here, because the Muslim world, I don't know one man in the United States of America, women forget it in the Muslim world, but one man in the United States of America who would be listened to more respectfully than Barack Obama. So he's it.
That's true.
He is the best ambassador to the United States of America, whether you like Obama or not. There isn't a better ambassador to at least get the ear of the Muslim world. So what he's trying to do is, in generalities, set up a less tense atmosphere so that then he can get the specifics done later on. I'm almost positive that's what's going on.
I'm sure, but even when you speak in generalities, it's still done to scale. So if you focus mostly on Israel, you talk a little bit about settlements on the West Bank, then when he implements policy, I'm thinking that it's not going to be in the best interest of Palestinian people. If you talk about women's rights, but you only talk about hijab, you don't really talk about the broader issues around abuse, around torture, around rape, around education, with any type of depth.
No, he could. Look, if he went in there with a hammer and insulted the Muslim world, even in a small way, that would become the headline. And all the other things that he would put forth would be obliterated by Al Jazeera saying, President Obama insulted us and said this. So I'm going to give him points for not being specific. Now, let's get to the America bashing, because that was the big deficit in the speech to me. He's made his point. We have heard it over and over again. To continue to brand the United States a torture nation is counterproductive, fallacious, and gets us nowhere. Go.
Well, it's not fallacious. Whether it's counterproductive or not, we could debate.
3 men waterboarded does not make a terror nation. Every other nation in the world has done far worse than we have, with the possible exception of the Vatican. Go ahead.
And there are many nations which are torture nations. And right now, President Obama is debating, and the White House is actively supporting legislation which would essentially make it legal to cover up human rights abuses for the last.
All right, that's another question, though. No, my point is that he hurts the country. Look,
no, he doesn't.
Yeah, he does.
He doesn't hurt the country.
His best line was, my primary job is protecting Americans. That was his best line.
Exactly.
Okay.
Right.
But
and so
he hurts the country by
the
reinforcing the terror nation business. Go.
Think about the argument. You just made an argument, though, Bill. Earlier on, a few moments ago, you said that Obama has a responsibility to speak to both sides, to make people feel comfortable and to open the door for a better conversation. And so what he does is he comes in, ironically, the same way George Bush did 5 or 6 years ago, and said, look, we've made mistakes. There are moments where we...
He said it a million times. How many times does he have to say it? It's the first time. How many times are you going to bring it up?
Bill, it's also not the first time that we've talked about Islamic extremism. It's also not the first time that we've talked about human rights violations. We've talked about a lot of these issues ad nauseum. But when you give a grand speech in front of the entire Muslim world when they're listening, you have a responsibility to identify America's culpability, too. He did that masterfully.
The oppression of women and the terrorism is still in play. He, Obama, has knocked out Gitmo and put the Army Field Manual into law, so it's over. Why keep going back? The other things are still in play. I'll give you the last word.
That's the olive branch. Those are examples of the rhetorical olive branches that Barack Obama offered today in order to explain to the Muslim world.
You can do it in a positive way and not hurt your country, hurt his country. All right, Doc.
And he didn't hurt the country.
All right. No, always great debating it.
Even Carl Rove gave him a B.